All right. Hello, everyone. Oh, sorry.
You got it. Do you want me to get up?
No, you're fine. You're
Okay.
fine. Thank you all so much for coming out to Books on Magic tonight. My name is Amali, and I'm the events coordinator here. Before we get started, I just have a few logistics to go over for how tonight's going to go. First off, we do ask that you keep your mask on at all times while at this event. We will be doing a hand-raised audience Q&A towards the end of the conversation, so please start thinking of questions to ask. And after the talk tonight, Jazmina will be signing and personalizing books at the desk near the side door where you checked in. We also have additional books available to purchase tonight. We also have a number of Kate's backlist available as well. And if you're joining us virtually on the YouTube live stream, we would love to encourage you to buy a copy of Linea Nigra online using the link in the live stream description. All right, so with all that in mind, we are very, very excited to introduce Jazmina Barrera and Kate Zambrino, who are here celebrating the release of Jazmina's newest book, Linea Nigra, an essay on pregnancy and earthquakes. I just would love to speak candidly for a minute. This week of events here in the bookstore have really felt so topical and important to me, with Angela Garbus a few nights ago and Jasmina today. With all the recent events in the news, I and many, many others have been thinking a lot about the power of bodily autonomy, the incredible strength of those who choose to become mothers and childbearers, and the dangers of that choice being taken away. Drawing connections between maternity and nature, earthquakes, lunar eclipses, and more, Jazmina's reflections feel larger than life, and yet so personal and intimate at the same time. In one word, this book is truly stunning. Jazmina Barrera was a fellow at the Foundation for Mexican Letters. Her book of essays, Cuerpo Extranto, Foreign Body, was awarded the Latin American Voices Prize from Literal Publishing in 2013. She has a master's degree in creative writing in Spanish from NYU. She is the editor and co-founder of Ediciones Antílope. Two Lines Press published her English language debut on Lighthouses in 2020. She was born and currently lives in Mexico City. And as I mentioned earlier, Kate Zambrino joins Jazmina in conversation tonight. Kate is the author of several works, most recently To Write As If Already Dead, a study of Hervé Guibert, and the novel Drifts. She is currently at work on The Light Room, a meditation on art and care amidst crisis, a collection of fiction, The Missing Person, and a novel, Foam. A 2021 Guggenheim Fellow in Nonfiction, she teaches in the MFA Nonfiction program at Columbia University and is the Strachan Donnelly Chair in Environmental Writing at Sarah Lawrence College. So without any further delay, please join me in welcoming Jazmina and Kate.
Thank you, everyone, for being here to celebrate this wonderful translation by Christina McSweeney of Jazmina Barrera's work. Yeah, I felt I read Linea Nigra, when I was sent the galley a couple months ago, but reading it again this week, it hit differently. Thinking about your meditation on choice and autonomy in that work, and how have you been thinking about it during this tour and talking about it in the United States with all of this? I feel like there's two things I was thinking about, which so many people have been thinking about. One, the horrific formula shortage that's happening now in the United States, and how much it says about how little the society values mothers while putting mothers up on a pedestal. With Mother's Day, both United States Mother's Day and Mexican Mother's Day, that was just this Sunday, as well as the possible striking down of Roe versus Wade in the Supreme Court. So how I imagine you've had a lot of conversations about that with people this week. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much to Books Are Magic, to Two Lines Press, to you, Kate, and to everyone here, to Christina McSweeney, who is not here but is always with me and with this book. And yeah, so, okay, I also want to apologize because my English is not that good and a little rusty, but okay. So yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. This is, as you say, so many coincidences. First of all, this is a book about motherhood. This is the Mother Days month in Mexico and here. And with what's happening with Roe versus Wade, I got to thinking that this is very much an issue for mothers and about mothers as much as it is about any other women. Because, you know, most of the people who get an abortion in America are women.
I think in the
mothers,
world,
I'm sorry.
the
In the
Guttmacher
world.
Institute, I think, said it's something like 70%.
Yes.
I mean, please don't fact check me. I think it's something like 70% of
Yes.
people that have abortions already
Yes.
were mothers.
So this is about mothers wanting to have a better life for themselves and for their children. This is about women everywhere just wanting to have the life they want to have. And what I say in this book, because I do mention abortions in this book, is that this is very much a book about transformations in the body during pregnancy, childbirth and breastfeeding. And it wasn't until I was there that I really began to think that going through all of that without wanting to is just torture.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's any other way to describe it. And yeah, so yes.
Right, and I think for me, thinking of the formula shortage and all the conversations happening around that is how little what happens, you know, when you get pregnant, when you give birth, and afterwards is ever spoken about. How invisible it is. How so often when you're pregnant, you're never told how excruciatingly difficult breastfeeding could be. It's not for everyone. It shouldn't have to be for everyone. There should be so many alternatives available. It might not physically be for so many, emotionally, in terms of capitalism. And it reminds me a lot of the urgency of your project and how much you write about other projects that is kindred to what you're writing, which is to give voice to what is usually not spoken about.
Well, also your work, which I came to after writing this book. Otherwise, you would have been there. but yeah,
I felt I was there, like us thinking about it at similar times. We have
Yes.
children of similar ages.
Yes, maybe we even wrote at the same time, like about the same things. Yeah. But definitely these are things you never talk about, and of course part of the research for this book was thinking why.
Yeah.
Why don't we talk about these things more? And I found, of course, many answers, but one of them is because society doesn't want to think about it. It's not convenient for it to think that women are not naturally made to be mothers.
No.
Motherhood is not easy.
No.
It is not this idea of it being the completion of womanhood. And so when you do think that, it feels like, well, women don't need help with this because it's easy for them, because it's what they're meant to do, it's what they like to do, so it's for them, it's their job. But when you hear the truth, when you know how hard it is, then it becomes a society's responsibility to make child raising collective.
Yes. And I think a lot of Mother's Day, and Linea Nigra is so wonderful, the Angela Garb's book is so wonderful, but publishers schedule these books on Mother's Day. I mean, it is part of the commodification of motherhood. And I think I remember Drifts was scheduled around Mother's Day to come out as well. You know, that's a lot of the, like, how to market it, right? You know, and so Mother's Day, I think, often reveals how we idealize the mother. I mean, I really hate Mother's Day, actually. Like, Mother's Day, it's always really irritated me. It's like this day where you're supposed to get flowers but not talk about collective care or the lack of support or, you know, the complete lack of, you know, maternity leave. And the fact that we don't speak about this as labor, as breastfeeding as labor. I mean, I love that the nature of the timesheet you're writing, that it's 8 hours, and that is, you know, and for both of us, we both breastfed, but it's an extreme privilege to be able to do that.
It is.
And like, what society supports that?
Yes.
You know, and to be able to have that in some way supported. And so I almost feel like these works that are coming out are a way to make public and visible what we're not supposed to. I knew nothing about breastfeeding before I got pregnant. And I'm really kind of embarrassed to say I refused to go to any of the birthing classes because I was like holding it off for as long as possible. Like I was like kind of in this like real bubble of denial for a long time. And I was like, oh, pregnancy is this thing. And it never occurred to me something happened afterwards, you know?
Yeah, me neither.
You know, but I remember
just the beginning when you
I remember giving birth and being like, oh, breastfeeding, like it never occurred to me.
Yes.
No one ever spoke to me about breastfeeding.
Me neither.
And I never knew anything about it. And I didn't even remember seeing anyone breastfeed. And you write about that.
Yeah.
Like this what is public, and then the relationship of writing to that and publishing to that. Like what is public and what is seen as invisible.
Yes.
And you write about the need to find travel guides, tour guides through that process because you felt so much was darkness, the state of pregnancy.
Yeah, so I have a little hope for Mother's Day. Like I wrote about it recently because, you know, in its origins, it was supposed to be a day of protest.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, me neither, but I did the research. And apparently this woman organized Mother's Day as a protest as a pacifist protest against war. It was a day for mothers to get together and protest because their sons were at war. And then, of course, publicity in the market just took over the day. And actually, it was in Mexico, the church and the state imported it as a way to silence a feminist movement that was happening in the south of the country. And I believe that it is very important right now to do the opposite, because also feminism and motherhood were for such a long time just apart, you know? And
yeah.
There's a reason for that, and it's a good reason that feminism was so preoccupied in getting the idea out that women weren't just meant to be reproductive bodies. That wasn't an issue for them, and it was even like frowned upon. But now it's the moment just to like acknowledge that there are mothers, there are people who want to reproduce and will reproduce, and we need feminism to really help us with everything we have to fight for around motherhood, around raising, parenting. And so I feel that we could take over Mother's Day and just use it to really, what's the word for execute, like? Demand, thank you. Demand, there's so many things we need to demand, you know, a longer mother leaves, longer father leaves, just carrying strategies from the state, and so many things we have to be on, and that can be done, and that have been done in so many countries, for example in Scandinavia.
Right. I feel like I was thinking when I was reading Linea Nigra about Miralademin Ukeli's and her project of maintenance labor, that she decided, when she was, she's done maintenance labor in like many different forms, thinking through sanitation workers, thinking through those who breastfeed, and she has this whole manifesto of maintenance labor, which is to call out what is usually invisible, like that sort of labor, the sort of duration that is invisible, and to make it visible. And I think your project is also doing that, is to think about labor and to think about time, which is, I think, often what we idealize, especially in regards to femininity, is done to take away the fact that it's labor, and it's often very invisible. Yes. Labor. So I want to, I love the moment in Linea Nigra where you wrote that you think in the shower, which is also something about time, and it reminds me of Miralademin Ukeli's thinking about work. But I wanted to ask you about the form of Linea Nigra and how it emerged, and because I feel it's divided in a couple of parts, but there is the pregnancy diary, and the sort of meditation on narrative and time and duration within a pregnancy diary. And then there is the, like, thinking about early motherhood. And that takes on, I think, a completely different sort of time. So how were you thinking about form when you constructed the book and when you were working on it?
Yes. So I started writing this book as a pregnancy diary, and it was just for me. It was just an intimate project. I had no plans of publishing it. And I was just trying to understand really what was happening to me, because there was so many things happening to me. And that is why I usually write, just to try to understand things, which of course always lead me to more questions than answers. But then life happened, and an earthquake happened, and my mother got sick, and it also happened that when I was pregnant, I didn't have I didn't have any friends, just pregnant at the same time as me, and my mother didn't remember a lot of things, so I felt kind of alone in the process, and I really wanted to compare my experience to other women's, and I wanted to be able to identify with people who had gone through this process. And so I found in books, I found in art, that company, that dialogue, and I started doing I wrote this book 5 years ago, and it doesn't seem like such a long time, but it is in many ways, and one of those ways is that in Spanish, at that time, there weren't that many books about motherhood available or just as visible as the other books. And so I started looking for them, and of course I found amazing things that just weren't that obvious. And so I started doing this small archive of literature, of visual arts about pregnancy, childbirth, and breastfeeding, just the transformations in the body. And there came a point when I realized that in the same way that those books and those images had helped me so much, had kept me company during that such a strange period of time, maybe my book could help someone out in a way. So that was really when it became a book. And as you say, there's the pregnancy diary, there's this little archive, and ever since I was pregnant, I've always written in a fragmentary way. That's just a thing that I really like to explore, and I think I haven't really run out of all the possibilities that the fragments have in literature. But when I was pregnant, I was just really tired. I was nauseous all the time. I couldn't think about anything else, but also I didn't even feel like I could think. Yeah. Like my mind was confused and blurry, and so I had these little glimpses of ideas that I could write. And then when my son was born, that was even harder. I had less time, I had less clarity of mind. I was so tired all the time, and I just wrote in my phone while I was breastfeeding, and so it was a naturally fragmentary book, but it was also, so many books on motherhood are fragmentary, and I kind of felt like it was an homage to those books, doing it that way. It was like an homage to that tradition, to that sort of canon of motherhood literature.
Yeah, I also I was also on the couch, pregnant, rereading the Argonauts and Little Labors, and I had read them before, but it felt like I needed that as companionship. Because I think, that moment in the Argonauts where Megan Nelson writes about going on tour for the art of cruelty while being heavily pregnant, and feeling like she was something of an anomaly, being a thinking pregnant person, like that wasn't what was expected. Actually, I don't know her in person, but I emailed her to thank her when I was, because she had learned heroin, so we had some contact. And I was like, oh, I'm also teaching when I'm like 9 months pregnant, etc. She's like, just remember, you can be standing up there, and no matter how brilliant you are, everyone will just be thinking how pregnant you are. That's the only thing anyone will be thinking about you. So I was like, oh yeah, okay. But yeah, I felt it was like a very voluptuous alienation in some way. And I feel like I love how you write about, I think you're subverting the pregnancy diary that's so expected and what to expect when expecting, or talking about the pregnancy app with the sort of body fruit calendar. It's like all so cute, right? And so I think that in so many ways you are sort of radicalizing or subverting that expectation of the pregnancy diary to try to find some space to be thinking throughout it, and to have that sense of lineage.
Yeah, I read that mothers who read those sort of manuals are more likely to have a depression than the ones that don't.
Yeah.
So,
I remember throwing them out, and that felt really good.
Because they are so full of everything that can go wrong.
Yeah.
And just like the dangers of everything.
They're also very kitschy.
They are. And they're so, they demand so much from women. It's like you have to breastfeed for like 5 years and all day long, and otherwise you will just be a terrible mother and a terrible woman. And so I felt like books like Little Labors, like The Argonaut, like your book, your books are just the opposite. Are books that are really smart, that have a sense of humor, which is something that is also lacking in those books.
Yes, they are very lacking.
Yeah, and they move around from the wonder of it to the terror of it in a way that, it's really...
I think sometimes there's been a fear generationally that if you speak of something negative regarding to it, then it will freak people out. So there's almost like this cloistered vow of silence. I remember when I was pregnant with my first, everyone was talking about a good birth. Don't talk about bad births. Just talk about good births. No one wants to hear about a bad birth. Yeah. And I was like, what's a bad birth? What's a good birth? Like, I had no idea. Yeah. I think what really spoke to me so much, I found was so incredibly touching, is the movement in your work where you reflect upon the possibilities, the speculative possibilities of your mother's own birth, and how that can happen only through a speculative space. And I think that that's another work you're doing in this, is to try to construct a lineage of the mother and grandmother who are also artists, and trying to imagine what is often forgotten, right? Not purposely kept back maybe, but forgotten. So I think that there's also that speculative space in this.
Yes. I was thinking about this, the silence around the bad births.
Yeah.
I loved this fact in I don't know which book of yours is, where it says like a birth is more dangerous than a parachute, like falling from a parachute.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean it's a huge mortality event.
Yes, and I recently read I'm sorry. Let me put that out. It's probably my husband. Okay. Also, let me see if it's an emergency because it's weird. See? Bueno? Bueno? See? It's a mistake.
Okay. See, always interruptions.
Yes, I know.
It's like
it is him, and I felt like if he's calling me, there must be an emergency.
Well, you also, because you're the translator of Rivka Galchin's Little Labors into Spanish, you speak about, there has been like this several really wonderful works in the past couple of years that are so inspired by Shay Shonigan's The Pillow Book, like Little Labors. And I was recently rereading it, and there's always interruptions. There's always a child crying. There's always a dog barking. And, she's not writing about pregnancy or motherhood. She is writing about small children. But there is a sense of a circumscribed life where you are taking care of others, where you're in service to others, that this fragmented form is like the necessary form.
Yes, definitely. Okay, let me remember. I was telling about that fact, the parachute, and I was in a bookstore a couple of days ago talking about this, and I mentioned that fact, and I mentioned this other statistic I had read about life expectancy of children below 5 years old, which is so low. So we don't talk about this.
No.
We don't. This is just silence, and then you become a mother, and you are terrified all the time.
Yeah.
And you start feeling like paranoid, like, am I overprotective? Is this normal? And of course it's normal. I mean, if you read the statistics, it's totally normal to be afraid all the time. And if we talked about it more, then maybe we wouldn't be as afraid, or we could do things so we weren't as afraid. I mean, in Mexico, I've known of children who drowned in pools, and I keep thinking, like, why isn't there a rule about pools where you have like wall them, you have a wall around them so that children don't fall into the pools? Well, because we don't talk about these things.
It reminds me of Samantha Schweblin's Rescue Distance.
Yes.
Like the concept of the rescue distance.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think, I just recently reread Fever Dream. And I think so much of that book, she is writing about mothers, but she's also writing about privilege. Like we live in this culture of worry and anxiety, but then we don't actually talk about the real inequities that are happening, right? That there are the accidents, but the reasons behind maternal mortality and how that's so connected to race and class, and the reasons behind infant mortality, or back to the formula shortage, right? To think about
Why is that happening?
it's happening because, can you imagine any other thing where there's a shortage, which, just to even imagine the effective lives of mothers worried about feeding their babies is horrifying.
It's horrifying.
And it's not even really much in the news now. Like, it's not even really being spoken about, and it's so scary, it's so horrifying. And I think that there's so much of the cult of the good mother now, right? Like what you were supposed to be a good mother. And I think that when I gave birth to my first, I was anxious all the time, and I thought I was doing everything wrong all the time. And I realized, like, that's what it's like desired, right? Is to have that effect, and it pits mothers against each other in this. Yeah, I don't know why it's not being talked about now.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
So let me think. Oh, you know what I also thought was there's so much about this book that's just so lovely. But I was really taken with the sense of collaboration in it. So when you think of a diary, usually you think of first person. You think of the sense of like the individual. And I think so much of your work in general, like on Lighthouses, feels so generous and so deeply collaborative. You're always referring to other writers. You're always building a library and an archive and reading alongside. But I was really touched by the idea of the we, not only the being inside of you, right? That sense of a we that you're both writing, but also Alejandro, your partner, writing also in the diary.
Yeah.
So I thought that felt very kind of deliciously subversive.
Yeah. So I feel like the part of the archive has to do with going against this idea of a monolithic motherhood.
Yeah.
This idea of motherhood, which is so hurtful to mothers, because really motherhood is goes through race, class, as you said, economy, just character, family, everything goes through motherhood. So every motherhood experience is unique, and I wanted to have that chorus in the book, that diversity of perspectives and ideas on motherhood, and also what you mentioned about, the I of the narration becoming a we as I get more pregnant.
Also gender flipping too.
And gender flipping
yeah.
too, yes. Yes, there's the queerness of pregnancy. I feel like that was one of the greatest revelations for me during the writing of this book, is just like becoming plural. And not only with me and my son, not only me and my family, but there is this fragment where I talk about going out into the street and looking to other kids, and there's this, I think it is in the book, that there's a documentary in Netflix called Babies, where it says that that adoptive parents and biological parents, in the same way, get a switch in the amygdala when they are taking care of a baby, and in the part of the brain that deals with fear. And this switch is turned on, and then it never goes away.
Yeah.
And I really have no idea what that means, but for me, it's that the thing is that I go out into the street and I look at any kid, and my thoughts go, well, the sweater is going to fall.
Oh, yeah.
It's cold and he's not really well, and has he eaten? And I watch movies and I feel like that is unlikely, because the kid hasn't eaten in 5 hours,
Yeah.
and he would be in a terrible mood. So this radical empathy, for me, goes beyond even children. It goes to the whole humanity, which might sound corny, but it's what I feel. And this also has to do with the microchimeric phenomenon that I mentioned in the book, which is like the cells from the mother and the fetus, and the cells from grandmothers and from uncles, and everyone can get mixed up. And so suddenly you realize you are a body made out of other bodies. And I feel like the pandemics made that much clearer, that what happens in my body affects your body, what happens in a body in China will eventually affect my body, and what we do to the ecosystem as a complex of bodies will eventually affect ours.
Yeah, we're a plurality.
That's
even
it.
though we do so much to convince ourselves that our immune system, the small little immune system we can somehow be isolated from others.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, Peter Sloterdijk, who wrote the spatial trilogy, Bubbles, there's like Bubbles, Foam, I forget the third one. But his first example of the bubble is the placenta, right? Like the placenta is the first apartment building. It's the first space where we are mingled, where we are, there are two you have another immune system inside of you. And that affects your own. You become, I love that, how you wrote, you're thinking so much through writing a narrative like you do in On Lighthouses, how you write that pregnancy narratives are doppelganger stories, and thinking through Frankenstein.
I do think that there's a whole philosophy of the pregnant body that hasn't been totally explored. I mean, that idea of being two persons at the same time, what is that?
Yeah.
It's so strange.
Yeah, I think there's so much uncanniness. There's so much richness
Yes.
and uncanniness that is so still ripe for exploring.
Yes. I feel like really for me the Gothic tradition was really helpful because I found a lot of examples there of being possessed by another, being just like drained out by another body of a strange thing, and this idea, even the word uncanny, which is I mean, I don't know uncanny, but unheimlich, the German one, that means not familiar or something like that. So you have the familiar in it, but you have the opposite of it. And it's your body, it's so familiar, and at the same time it's so alien. It's the person who came out of your body and you know it, but you don't at the same time. Yeah.
It is alien, it's alienating, but also so full of abundance, possibly at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's funny. I felt very plural reading Linea Nigra. Even like I felt that on Lighthouses, but I felt that a lot reading Linea Nigra because like I started reading. There's this like wonderful, like there's all these amazing anecdotes of art history in it, and you write also a lot about your mother as a painter and thinking through her own artwork. But there's that anecdote about Gustave Courbet's origins of the world, and like I was reading it, and I was like, oh, I have to tell Jazmina that Jacques Lacan owned the painting, and of course that ends your anecdote. So I felt like I got done talking to you throughout. I was like, how do we share so many references? It felt very uncanny, but felt abundant.
Yeah, but also I think we share so many references because there aren't as many.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
If you wrote a book on death, maybe you can have 3, 4, 5 completely different books full of different references, but on motherhood, there aren't as many.
And I also really struggled when I was pregnant, and I thinking of what I wanted to read and desiring so desperately to read something complex that dealt with pregnancy, and realizing just how few pregnant narrators there have been in literature.
Yes. And few pregnant narrators that are not narrated by a male author.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's not that they do it wrong necessarily, but they, I'm sure, will do it differently.
Yeah, I wonder why that is. I wonder whether there's something about that. I know why that is. I just wonder what, like, it's, maybe the notebook form kind of is more a form that can allow for exhaustion and interruptions and illness. I'm not sure why it is. Maybe it's publishing. I don't know. I do know, my Driss was rejected a lot for various reasons, I'm sure, but the pregnant narrator really freaked out a lot of male editors.
Yeah, I feel like that's changing a lot, and I mean lately, at least in the Spanish publishing world, you see a lot of books on motherhood, on pregnancy. But I also feel like there's been a backlash in Spanish-speaking world. Like suddenly, it's like, okay, you had your time, you can sit down.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, it's been too much.
Yeah.
You all say the same things. Like, yeah. Like, yes.
I think this would be a great time to open up to questions. Does anyone have any questions for Jazmina?
Hola, Jasmina. I'm saying hi to my former student at the MFA degree.
Oh, amazing.
And I wanted to ask Jasmina, because as you might know, I wrote Fish, it's been translated into English, about pregnancy in the context of September 11th, right? And I remember a friend of mine heard about my manuscript, and she gave me a wonderful book, Woman and Intimate Geography. And it helped me so much, because mine deals with the biological aspect of being a mother, the animal aspect of being a mother, let's put it that way. So I wanted to ask Jasmina, what did you read?
I'm supposed to repeat for the YouTube live. I'm supposed to repeat the question. You're the author of the novel?
It's a poetry book.
Oh, the poetry book Fish, which deals so much with the animal of pregnancy, and a work that you read that was really meaningful to you is Woman and Intimate Geography. So what did you read, Jazmina?
Well, I read a lot.
There's a whole. I
there's a
love
whole
books.
list.
I feel
Yeah.
the Jazmina Barrera book is always has a bibliography to it.
Yeah.
You have to love a book with a bibliography.
This one is called The Books I Read While I Was Pregnant. No, while I was breastfeeding. And so a book that I really, really loved, and I think she was here like a couple of weeks ago, was like a mother.
Yeah.
The author is called
Angela Garbs.
Angela Garbs.
Uh-huh.
And that just for me was amazing because, as Kate mentioned, the books, the manuals, what to expect when you're expecting, etc., deal a lot with the practical aspects of everything. But this was about the biology and just the wonder of it. I mean, it's a pregnancy, as so many things regarding the woman's body, have been understudied. And we know a lot, but we don't know as much as we should. And that was, for me, was really impressive when I was pregnant. Like, I went to my gynecologist, and I was like, well, this is happening to me. Why is it? Who knows? Like, but is it normal? Yeah, probably. Like, and I asked questions like, for example, who starts the labor? The woman's body or the fetus?
Well,
They
that's a
don't
smart
know.
question.
They don't know. They have theories, but no one really knows. So this is a wonderful book that talks about breastfeeding and just all the scientific new knowledge about the pregnant body, and it was really, really important for me because it's amazing. I mean, it's a whole world. What we already know is just stunning, the capacity of a woman's body, and it's just and also a little terrifying.
It is?
Like, I recently read about the placenta.
Uh-huh.
So the placenta apparently is this whole new organ that builds when you are pregnant, and one of the
Placentas
first
are amazing.
placentas
Yeah.
are amazing.
Yeah.
And like one of the first things they do is that they hide the fetus from the body, so they distract the body so that the body doesn't expel the fetus. So it's like, look here, and once it's a little older, it plugs into the woman's like blood torrent, is that a word? And it starts sucking blood. And then I had heard, when I was pregnant, I heard like, there was a syndrome, I don't know if it was dysplasia or something like that. But for me it was just high pressure. So I heard it was dangerous when you got high pressure while you were pregnant.
Preeclampsia.
Yeah, preeclampsia, thank you. Preeclampsia. And then but now I know that the thing with preeclampsia is that the placenta is sucking so much blood that your heart is pumping so fast. You imagine that. It's like a horror movie.
Did you see your placenta afterwards?
I didn't.
Oh.
I think so, but I
Yeah.
don't remember it.
It's like the last time the midwife like stretched, she was like so amazed by it. She's like, look at this thing. It's this, like big house. I like took pictures of it, and John was like, can you get that please away from me? Yeah, it's pretty gory. It's pretty amazing looking.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
Hi. Well, I just want to thank you. I read Linea in Spanish last year, and it helped me to understand, for example, words as Frankenstein differently, and it's the classic, and it's like, wow, any book that does this, like a word that does this right now in 2022, I think it's valuable, and so thank you for writing this. Also, I don't have children, but I read it aloud to my mother, and then she read it aloud to her mother. So your family and your story are now part of my family, and they have like got closer to literature thanks to your work. So I think it is amazing. And you were saying that while you wrote it, you thought you didn't like think about publishing, and afterwards you thought maybe that will be helpful for other pregnant women, but it is helpful. I think in general for women, not only pregnant women and for families. So thank you for writing this.
Thank you so much.
Do you want me to repeat? It's so wonderful. I mean, yeah, but I think so. You were saying that you read it originally in Spanish, that it showed you so much about Frankenstein, and that you read it to your mother, your mother read it to her mother.
Yeah.
So it's so part, yeah, and I think it's so, this work is also, I think, such a beautiful meditation on your mother and your grandmother.
Yeah, and actually, that has happened to me quite a couple of times with this book, and I feel it's just, that's one of the greatest gifts this book has given me. I read with my mother when I was a child from like whenever, or I mean always, until I was like 10 years old. We read every night together. Even when I was able to read, we just took turns. And I feel like that was so important for me and for my relationship to literature, that the idea of connecting literature with an affective bond was absolutely crucial for what I do right now. And I know that goes away sometime, but the fact that this book, I don't know why it makes people want to do that again. For me, it's like the greatest gift. So thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Florencia. I'm part of Escribir es un lugar, de la comunidad Escribir es un lugar. And I've never been a mother myself, but you both mentioned something very interesting. You talk about that writing this, that in general your writing is a fragmentary process. That's what I understood. And I would love you to expand more, Jasmina, in what did you mean with that, and if you could compare that experience with this book and with other with the other books in terms of how fragmentary was the process of writing.
So a question about the fragmentary process across your works. And so yeah, I think both, I mean, you're both on Lighthouses. I mean, you've written other works, but the two that I've read in translation, both play with fragments in very different ways. So how have you thought about fragments across your work? So there's process and then there's form, right?
Yeah.
And so how have you been thinking about the fragment?
Yes, thank you. That's so nice to see you. So I feel like I really have no idea why I write fragments. I mean, it's just an instinctive thing with me, and maybe because of a necessity to just go over different tones, things. I do really like the idea of collage and the idea of montage, and I feel like for me it was very different working with On Lighthouses, which I felt it as a visual project. I mean, I imagine the fragments of that book as images, and I work with them even as like post-its, for example, like moving them around in the word processor I use. It's called Scrivener. So I wanted to do a cabinet of curiosities, and that was my idea. Like, these fragments were objects in that cabinet. And with Linea Nigra, it was more about the rhythms of motherhood, and as I say, about paying homage to these books that have those same rhythms. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's interesting. To Lighthouses feels, you said post-it, they feel like postcards too.
Yeah.
And that very like visual square like feel to it.
Yes, and I will always find pretexts to keep writing fragmentary works. Like right now I'm writing about my great-grandfather's dictionary of Maya. And so I'm writing a fragmentary book because I feel like I'm replicating the dictionary entrance.
Oh, amazing.
Like, well, yeah. Thank you.
Philo?
I'm wondering, just you guys were talking about the narrator being pregnant, right, as sort of like uncanny thing, and Kate often speaks about the book or writing as a room, you know, and I just
As a room?
as a room or as a house or as, you know, and I wonder how that shift for you when you were writing pregnant and when your narrator being pregnant, how does that kind of affect, you know, the space of the book in a way? Like,
How did that shift?
So, Philo's question is, if thinking of writing like a room as a space, how did it shift from being a pregnant narrator, that space, to this after period? Because you had said, you say in the work you wanted to structure it from pregnancy through weaning, and it does follow that in some way.
Yeah, so I'm not really sure how to answer, but I mean, motherhood while you are pregnant and the first few months of life of your child are a process that keeps changing really fast all the time. And so you have to be very flexible to adapt to that. And so writing, I feel, has the advantage of being a very flexible tool. You know, if my thing were like climbing mountains, that would have been hard. But like these, I try to adapt these to my life. And so as I said, like the first few months, I just wrote like quick fragments in my cell phone, and then I got more time, and then the pandemic hit, and then I got less time. And then, yeah. So I feel like the room of writing for me used to be a very glamorous room. Like I could drink my tea and have my time and walk around. And then it became like this very urgent thing to do. Like I got to inhabit writing for a shorter amount of time every day and with a lot of more urgency. And also I feel like a different kind of satisfaction because I don't take for granted writing right now. It's like a luxury, a privilege. Don't know if I answered.
You reference the photographer and writer Maura Davies' anthology on motherhood at the end, and she has this thinking about certain types of first-person writing, that some of it, she compares it to her photography, that some of it's like live on the street, you know, happening in process, and other happens in the studio. So how much of this work happened in sort of real time for you, and how much of it was you reconstructing that feel of what it was like?
Yeah, a lot of it happened in real time, and a lot of the workshop was just trying to keep that feeling, but polishing it and giving it shape, and just working around the collage of it all. You know, trying to the different fragments to have a dialogue with each other that made sense, and that also like made sense with the ones previous and right after the fragment, but with the whole as well. So it was, I feel like the writing, it all happened a lot in my mind, what it was happening, but the montage was like the thing that took more time. Yeah.
I've often wondered if the reason why there's less pregnant narrators, I mean, I think there's starting to be a lot more, and there's now this really wonderful abundance that you reference so much, is because there's only 9 months. I mean, if you are through the entire pregnancy, and that's not really enough to write a book. And then afterwards, if you do have a baby, everything changes every week, so your memory changes. So I've often wondered if that's one of the reasons we have less. Because who has the permission and space to write a book in 9 months?
Right.
Unless you've written a book before.
Also, I found that I asked a lot of my writer mother friends, and many of them said like, well, I really didn't want to think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was such a huge part of my life already that I wanted to write about just anything else, about karate and space, I don't know, things, but yeah.
Do we have time for one more question?
Did you keep a journal while being pregnant?
So the question is, so like an actual physical journal, because so much of this work is the journal.
No, I kept the notes on my phone.
More notes.
Yes, and then I did have like this the typical libreta. What's the
Notebook.
notebook? Thank you. Like the typical notebook that you do for your child. Would you write like the first word, the first I don't know. And there's this book I love so much, like the ongoingness by Sarah Manguso, that talks about writing that notebook. And about this obsession of wanting to document everything and at the same time don't want it to miss anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is a dilemma. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I believe that Jazmina will be signing books afterwards, and the paperback of Lighthouses also just came out. So, yeah, please stick around and
Thank you so
sign
much.
books. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, thank you again to Kate and Jazmina, and congratulations on this beautiful book. Thank you to all of you who came out. Thank you to everyone who asked such wonderful questions. We do ask that you give Jazmina a few minutes to get settled back there, but then once she's settled, that you can go ahead and line up. We also ask that you clear the space so that our staff can start to rearrange our store once again. But that's all from me. Thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you so much. How do I turn this off? Or I just leave it like